here this afternoon. I have my notes just as a crutch, but I'm going to try very hard not to use them. I am Paula Whiterlight, and I have the distinct honor and privilege of being the president and co-founder of Champions for Children. And I do mean co-founder because there are lots of us here who are co-founders. You'll know them because they have the gold badge on. There's probably 9 of us from the board. We are a membership-based volunteer network of women, and I do mean volunteer with a capital V. And our mission is to raise awareness, which is what we're doing today. We do several of these a year. Raise money, I'll talk to you about that after, and make an impact on children's well-being. To me, there's really little else as important as our children's mental health. So that's what we're here about. So I'm honored to be here to do that. I'm also going to be very on theme with my brief remarks because I'm very happy to be here. I'm happy there's no tornado. I'm also happy about this panel. I'm sorry I'm saying it in front of Costa. I'm very happy about this panel. This is, the expertise that's sitting in front of you is just incredible. So we're so excited to have these panelists with us to talk about the art and science of happiness. I'm also happy about the collaboration that took place to be here. This space is unbelievable once you find it. The sense of community for moms. Where was this when I was having my babies 30 years ago? This is magnificent. So we're very pleased to be collaborating with Pink Moon and Jill Adams. The second partnership we have is with Rooted 3, who are our caterers. It's a mom-daughter restaurant a couple blocks down in Cordell. They believe that good food makes good moods. And it's all clean food, gluten-free, dairy-free, all kinds of everything free, but it's delicious. So enjoy that. And then the third collaboration we have for today is Cherry Blossom Sitters. And they are actually sponsoring us. So they did not charge us for their service to babysit. So for any of the moms who brought babies, we're excited about that collaboration. One of the reasons why we wanted to do that was we are a group of women that span all generations. There's some baby boomers and some millennials and so forth and so on, and we can never find the right time of day to do this. So if you have the secret to that, we don't know if it's 8 o'clock, or if it's lunchtime, or if it's 4 o'clock, or if it's 7 o'clock. So we're trying 4 o'clock, and I think the babysitting part of that was really important. So, all right. So I'm honored, I'm happy, and my third H is I'm going to hand this off. That's how I remembered it. I'm going to hand this off to Jimmy Benza. Jimmy Benza is, Dr. Benza is Executive Director of the Laurie Center, which is near and dear to my heart and has been for 20 years. They are also one of the recipients of our funds that we raised money for. So we had 3 grantees last year. The Laurie Center was one of them. We've been raising money for them for a few years, and Jimmy's going to talk to you for a few minutes about the impact that those funds made at the Laurie Center. After he speaks, he's going to hand it off to Lisa, who's our moderator and our another board member. All right?
Great.
All right. Thank you, Jim. All right.
So happiness, that's where we're arriving at. But how do we get there? And that's, as a champion, who are filling this room, and to be champions, for those who are getting to know our group, it's a big journey for families and kids, young kids. Children birth to 12 is who Laurie Center focuses on, and overcoming all sorts of adversity and trauma. So just in the last 6 months, the Champions Funds have helped support us to work with 84 children from 3 to 12 years old, getting emergency psychiatric evaluations, multidisciplinary team meetings, calls from parents in the middle of the night with the child upset, so scared, or so angry, and not being able to be safe in the home, and being able to have access to a child psychiatrist or a therapist to help support the child and the parent. Ages 10 to 14 right now, the second leading cause of death is suicide. And so that's 10 to 14. But they just don't show up. Dr. Reg Lori used to say, and this team knows, they don't just show up as teenagers with that. There's early indications. And so Lori Center is really all about early intervention. And so we're helping kids be safe, be able to make friends in school so they can learn and have their best success. So that's outcomes on a kind of broad level. And then we have, these are real people. This is us. This is, these are our children, our families who are impacted. So I want to read you from one of our families. I knew, this is a parent, I knew I needed help when I started thinking about running away and not bringing my son. I had nothing left. My days were filled with picking up early in school, nights, trying to protect my other children from angry outbursts and physical aggression. I would lay on my bed at night, hopeless. I can't remember how I got to Lori Center, but I do know is it changed my life completely. We were matched with a lovely therapist, Julia, and a very warm and most laid-back child psychiatrist, Dr. James Herrera, who matched us. And life changed in time. I don't want to run away anymore. I'll never forget the impact of the Lori Center and these two individuals on my family's life. So it's real stuff, right? I mean, we all have a connection to folks who are impacted by mental health. And this support and what you'll hear from the team today, we're all in with families who need us to be all in. That's the definition of champions. So thank you for coming and thank you for your ongoing support, and we'll look forward to unfolding happiness in the ways that you're about to hear. So.
Before we start, just want to, we're being recorded. So we're going to put this on our YouTube channel, so you can find it on our YouTube channel. So I have to say that.
Thanks, Paula. She was trying to mouth that to me subtly, and I was like, what? So I want to jump right in because we don't have a lot of time. But first, I just want to say, I am so honored to be sitting here with these. These are like the rock stars of mental health in our area. And, this is, if you think about it, what a bargain to be here, instead of Bad Bunny or Taylor Swift, you've got these three. So it's truly I'm kind of a fangirl, so I'm happy, very honored and happy to be here. Secondly, I want to do a shout out to the most amazing mother and grandmother, and that is my mom. And third of all, I would like to say happy birthday, Anne.
People to celebrate with.
Now that I've embarrassed everybody, we could get started. So Costa, I'm going to start with you. So Costa actually studies happiness. So I'm going to ask Costa, how are you defining what happiness actually looks like for kids?
Yeah, so a lot of the research on happiness, sort of calls it subjective well-being to avoid this loaded term happiness, because happiness can be, whatever everybody defines it to be for themselves. So when we study subjective well-being, the key components are, relatively frequent and strong positive emotions, relatively infrequent negative emotions, and then how you think about your life as a whole. So how satisfied you are with your life or different domains from your life. So, and this is how we evaluate it in adults, of course. Well, it turns out that you can pretty much ask the same for, teenagers, adolescents. There's evidence that children as young as 8 can pretty well answer those questions about their internal states and about how they think about their life and how satisfied they are. And so, sometimes we're like, oh, but can you trust people to report this? Of course, there are biases and so forth. But ultimately that is, perhaps unsurprisingly, one of the most reliable way to assess people's happiness is to ask them essentially how happy they are. Now, if you're talking about younger children, it gets a little bit more complicated. I guess you can ask an observer, you can ask parents. Turns out parents can be kind of biased. So then you can ask, another observer, a researcher, to kind of look at reported interactions and so forth. Of course, that gets kind of expensive quite fast. And so a lot of the research that I'll be talking about today on child happiness is really looking at how something that happened to the child when they were 5, like, whether the parent, the parenting style of the parent, for example, affects them later in life when you can actually measure happiness. So does it predict, anxiety and things like that as a teenager? Does it predict life satisfaction when they graduate college and things like that? So that's kind of how you define happiness in that space.
I'm going to turn to you, Matt. So as we were talking before this, Matt described that there is some irony in the theme of this panel. Matt, can you talk about that and say how we might reframe this?
So, I may be the designated contrarian on the panel, which is a role I welcome. So I think when I heard about a panel that was going to invite, or a discussion that was going to invite parents to talk about happiness in children, I feel like that could be easily construed as, how can I make my child happy? Or how can I, as a parent, assure happiness for my kids? And I think I don't know if it's ironic or more of a paradox. There's that, and any Russian literature majors in the group, does anyone remember the first line of Anna Karenina? Every happy family is alike, and every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. I think the version of that for parenting and kids' happiness might be something like the surest. Like there are many ways for parents to make their children unhappy, and it's probably impossible for parents to make their children happy. Something like that. And so I think what I was saying in our preparatory discussion is, maybe the question is, what are the conditions under which kids flourish? What are the ways that families can function so that kids are most likely to thrive? What are the characteristics of growing up that build emotional resilience in young people, that make them most likely to be able to lead fulfilling, satisfying lives? Those seem to me like probably things that most parents, if you really pin a parent down, is that you want your child to be happy all the time? Well, no, I want my child to live a full and satisfying life, which, as we all know from experience, has a lot of it has to do with how you handle unhappiness, and how you manage adversity, and how you respond when you get knocked down, and how, as Costa was referring to, not just how you feel, but also the story that you're telling yourself about your life, which for kids is hard. Asking a 6-year-old about the story they have about their life, they don't have necessarily the capacity for abstraction to allow them to do that the way that an adult does. But kids do start to narrativize their life very, very early on. I'll just mention one research anecdote that I'm sure informs some of Costa's work. There's a study that was done at Emory University in Atlanta about 15, 20 years ago that looked at the way that families tell the story of their ancestors to their children, and found that when parents or other caregivers tell young children about things that their forebears went through, survived, made it through to the other side, that actually increases emotional resilience and well-being in the children. Like knowing that I come from people who can get through hard things and come out on the other side and live to tell about it and teach my children about it, is actually like an extraordinary resource that families can give to their children. Is that about happiness? I'm not sure. But it certainly feels like it matters a lot. So I guess those were some of the reactions I was having to the idea of the panel.
So much my brain is kind of exploding. And by the way, we'll have time at the end for questions. So I'm sure that you're also buzzing with that. And I'm going to turn to you. What are some ways that parents can promote their kids' well-being, including the role of community?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. The two things that I think are so centered in parents' lives is they want competent kids, right? I mean, why do we worry about what school they go to, whether or not they take the flute? And we're trying to get competent kids. And parents also care about community. They care about the kids have friends. But if you think about that a little more, I'd like to sort of build on what Matt was saying, which is competence. It comes with sometimes struggling, you know? Yes, we can all go to the flute concert, but between getting the flute and performing at the concert, you know, you have to practice. And so what are parents going to do about that? If the kid doesn't want to play the flute and tell you you're sunk from the very beginning, so think of another area of competence. Kids have to own it. And parents, they have to sometimes provide a structure that help the kids do what they want to do, but it's got to be the kids' effort, the kids' idea, the kids follow through, because that's what they're learning. Who cares about the flute? But if you learn that if you do something every day for 10 minutes, you get better, that's actually a really good lesson to learn. The other thing that I would say about competence, I worked for years with a woman that was just convinced that she was stupid, really convinced that she was stupid. Well, how could I apply for that job? I'm so stupid. You know, I'm not doing too well at work. It's because I'm stupid. So that's so interesting that you think you're so stupid. You know, why do you think that? Well, you know, I could never do school. My mother wrote all my papers for me. Well, you know, that was so interesting that her mother, even in college, her mother wrote her papers for her. So I said, okay, let's see if you're stupid. We're going to do some psychological testing. You know, you're stupid. Let's see how stupid you are. Well, kind of fun. Let's just measure the depths of the stupidity. And as you can imagine, she was not stupid. She in fact, was pretty competent, but she had really taken this as being stupid because her mom didn't trust her. Her mom thought she couldn't do it. And that's always lingered in my mind that, you know, nobody likes to see their kids suffer. On the other hand, learning stuff and becoming competent requires a fair amount of suffering. So you gotta hold firm on that. The other thing that seems to me to be really important is community. If we're talking about joy and happiness, and the way our lives are structured, it's not great for community. You go to school, then you maybe go to soccer, and you might have a team, but goodness knows you're going to change kids, right? You're going to be on a different team and then a different team. So that doesn't really lead to community. So parents really have to think about what is their community. Now, in some cases, some parts of the country, particularly, your community is your family. You have aunts and uncles and cousins, and that's kind of your community. You just belong. But in Washington, D.C., that's sort of rare. And so I am very interested in how adults build community and consistency over time. And I really think that's important because one of the things that kids need is predictability. They need repetition. They need things that they can depend on, things that just happen, that are part of their lives. And what I have seen I have the perspective that many of you don't have, because I've raised a family, I'm raising grandchildren, and I've kind of seen things play out with the friends of my children and so on and so forth. One of the things that interests me is when groups of families, like 2 or 3 families, 4 families, tend to get together all the time. Like maybe they're neighbors, maybe they all belong to a swimming club, maybe they went to school together and so they get together, or maybe 2 of the kids were in class together and it sort of develops. This, I think, is really important. And I was thinking in my own life that most of my closest friends I was introduced to by somebody who was probably 2 or 3. And as a parent, if you take those opportunities to figure out, hey, of all these mothers, which ones do I really like? And then you start building a community of people that you like, their kids are going to come along and like each other. And I am interested when I look at these kids that have come up getting married. Who do they want to come to their weddings? They want the families that they've always spent Thanksgiving with. They've always gone to the strawberry patch with. They've always gotten together for cookouts on the 4th of July. Though that group of people, the kids know each other and are accepted, and ideally are all different ages. The parents accept each other, and then you also have these parents become like the aunts and uncles of the kids. So building community in a mindful way, I think, is really smart. And I also think parents need community. Now, here at People, I mean, you have a fabulous resource. One of the parents teach me, what works. And my favorite intervention I shared with these folks was the Friday night dinners that a group of mothers did. These were all working mothers, it's killer. You're working all the time, you're raising your kids, you get it Friday. I mean, that's really amazing accomplishment in itself. And these group of women would all gather. It would be movie night. So they'd all come in and they'd put on a movie, they'd all watch a movie, and this is dinner. Popcorn, mozzarella sticks, and apple slices. And the moms all drank vodka. And I thought, genius. So I recommend that you try innovative ways to build community.
You ate the apple slices.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Costa, going back to you. This is a large question because this is at the heart of your work. But if you can encapsulate it somewhat here, what does the research say about the relationship between social media or screen time in general and happiness for kids? And maybe more importantly, what can parents do about it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so surprisingly, the research isn't as strong as you might believe just by reading what's written out there. It's sort of like approaches in some circles like a moral panic about it, right? So a lot of the research is based on correlational studies. Meaning that we don't know necessarily whether, kids who spend too much time on social media then, develop anxiety and depression and so forth, or whether kids who are already struggling, to find friends and so forth, spend more time online, for example. Now, there is, beyond the scientific literature, there is, mounting evidence that, at least for some kids, social media can be really bad. And more broadly, evidence in adults as well as children that there is a lot of social comparison going on social media, and so especially for young adolescent girls, that could be really damaging in terms of self-esteem in that time of their lives when they're forming their identity and so forth. Although it seems like now the social media is also coming for the boys, is what I'm seeing with, looks maxing and, fitness influencers and so forth. So this body image comparison thing. But again, so that's where one of the studies that we're doing in my lab together with Matt as well, that we're looking at, to actually get kids as they're getting their first smartphone, 10 to 14-year-olds, and we're essentially randomly assigning them to either completely block their social media on their phones or let the parents decide. And so we're basically creating two conditions where, in one condition they don't have any social media versus they have some social media, and then we can see what happens 3-6 months later. We're measuring all sorts of outcomes. So this is an ongoing study. So if you're interested, talk to me. There's some flies over there if you're recruiting. Anyway, so there's another piece of evidence is that, especially with smartphones, the earlier kids get their first smartphone, again, this is sort of longitudinal correlational evidence, but the getting your smartphone earlier is associated with later problems in terms of anxiety, depression, and mental health. So, so if you get it at 8 versus 9, you're more likely to say that you're unhappy at 21, for example. And so, there seems to be a relationship there, but again, it's not super clear. Maybe there's other factors that go into it. In terms of what parents can do about it, I think we kind of have to go back to basics here and sort of like talk about what we know from much longer and broader literature on parenting styles and well-being. And so we know that the best parenting style for the longer-term happiness that we talked about is something called authoritative parenting. And so if you kind of imagine these two axes. So one axis is, how warm the parent is, sort of providing warmth to the child. And then the other axis is sort of expecting competence or, having high expectations. So an authoritative parent would be in that quadrant where it's high warmth and high competence, or it's high expectations. We also have authoritarian parenting, which is somebody who expects high competence, but without warmth. So it's just sort of like you do what I tell you to do kind of parenting. And then, of course, there's permissive parenting, where you're warm, but you have no expectations. And so, authoritative parenting, I guess, is the academic term. I was trying to kind of figure out where gentle parenting falls within that. And I think as intended, as the way it's described, I think gentle parenting is actually essentially the social media version of authoritative parenting, because you're supposed to, warmly explain to your child what your expectations are, but stay firm on those expectations, right? Now, how parents actually apply this is probably a little bit more on the permissive side. But anyway, all of that to say is that how do you manage screen time? Well, you have to have clear rules. You have to make sure that, if the child has, half an hour on their iPad or something like that, and, that half an hour is gone. So an authoritative parenting might say something like, okay, or, you need to put the iPad away. Can you do that? Or do you want me to help you, for example? But there's no discussion about extending the time or that sort of thing. So having those clear rules, I think, is really important. I do think that in the case of screen time, it is important to kind of think about ourselves and our screen time, because we know that adults are using screen time a lot. So the average American is 4 to 5 hours a day on their smartphone alone. And so I think for those rules to work, an authoritative parent might also think about, okay, what am I doing, when I'm around my child, right? Of course, after they go to bed, you can, scroll social media for as long as you like, but so thinking about, giving the right sort of example. So I think those are, some of the two of the important things. And then the third thing I'd like to point out is we often sort of like are over-focused maybe, or at least maybe I think so because I think about this all the time on screen time. But I think it's really important to think about what other things does, my child have as an option to entertain themselves, right? And so to the extent that you can create these opportunities for, unstructured play with, a consistent play buddy or something like that, by creating community, for example, this is mostly anecdotal evidence, but it's or preliminary evidence, but it seems like children, if you ask them, they prefer playing with their friends in person. They're just, that's not always available, right? And so, of course, it's more of a systematic issue about how society is organized right now, but it is something that parents could think about in terms of creating these opportunities, right? Because it's like, okay, I've done my homework, now what do I do? Well, if I'm home, I have no friends, then, or if we're free, then I'm, it seems like a reasonable thing to, go on social media or play online or something like that. So kind of trying to create those opportunities.
Mm-hmm. One thing you said really resonated with me as well, and you sort of pointed out a choice, giving the child a choice. You can go plug it in, or I can plug it in for you if you want. Right? That's the choice.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Matt, coming back to you. So we talked a little bit about this before too, and I know you have some thoughts. So how would you describe how parenting has changed over the past couple of decades? And how do you think that relates to parents' ideas about their own roles in kids' happiness? And you alluded to that earlier too.
Yeah, so I'll make sort of like a generational comparison here. So I grew up in the 70s, 80s, and the biggest change in family structure and daily lives since the 70s to now is clearly women in the workforce. So where women participation in the workforce was in the 40s and 50s percentile, now it's high 80s, low 90s. And what's fascinating is when you look at the time that parents spend with their children. So compared with the 70s and 80s, mothers now spend more time with their children than they did when I was growing up. So they're working much more than they did before. I mean, many women never had the option not to work. Some did. But on a population level, much more work and more time with their children, which begs the question of sort of like what gives, right? Sleep, friendship, other things. And fathers spend about 3 times as much time with their pre-adolescent children as they did in the 70s and 80s. So you have more time with mom, despite the fact that mom is usually working outside of the home, and more time with dad. So the result is children are much happier, right? Because of all that time with their parents. The graphs go like this, right? Time spent with your parents and happiness, which Costa will tell us is association, not causation. But the association story is interesting, and I think for the purposes of this discussion, I think how does the fact that children spend so much more time with their parents and so much more time with adults than they used to, how does that impact on happiness? A friend of mine in our neighborhood, and we grew up in similar ways. We grew up as little kids in small towns. He in upstate New York and I in Ohio, and we often remark about the fact that we have had to teach our boys all the games that we learned from other kids. Because we would just go outside and older kids would tolerate our presence and we would learn how to play games from the time we were 4 or 5 years old. And our kids don't learn that way because they're always with us. They're always, and if they're not with us, they're with adults being paid to be with them, right? To coach them, to mentor them, to do whatever. And so, Costa alluded to this as well. So you've got like way more time with parents, way more time with other adults, way less time in unstructured time, way less time in the world of children. Everything is mediated by adults. And this actually, and I should have prefaced all of this by saying there's massive cultural variation here. There's massive geographic variation. There's socioeconomic variation. But the trends are the same in every demographic group of what I'm describing. And sometimes for different reasons. For some kids, it may be because their parents are hyper anxious and over involved, and for some, it's because parents are worried about their children's safety. But whatever the causative factor is, the end result is the same, which is that kids' lives are being managed by adults. And that seems to be at least associated with less happy kids, more stressed kids, kids that are less able to manage their own emotions effectively, kids that are less able to navigate difficult social situations effectively. So to Anne's point about competence, the time spent with adults seems to be negatively associated with kids' basic competence. So why are we doing it? I say this as a parent who has spent way too much damn time with my children. To the detriment of my of aspects of my own well-being, I'm sure. I think we do it because we think we're protecting them. We think we're somehow kind of future-proofing our children. If we're with them all the time, if we're nurturing them all the time, if we're protecting them all the time, if we are making sure that whatever is coming down the pike, and what did we talk about before we talked about AI coming down the pike? There was something before, right? Now it's about how AI is going to absorb all the jobs, and the competition for our kids to live profitable, successful lives gets harder and harder. So what does that do to parenting? It makes us tighter and tighter and tighter, and more intent upon managing and engineering the lives of our kids. It's a very difficult thing to avoid doing. It is deeply embedded in our brains, in our mammalian brains, to do whatever we can to protect our offspring and to maximize the chances of survival of our offspring. That's how we're wired for over millions of years. And in our current crazy world, what that feels like if you're a parent is I've got to make sure that my kid is optimized for success. And so that what that translates on a day-to-day basis is being in their faces all the time. And I think those of us in the field, most of us are observing this, despite what we do with our own kids sometimes. We're probably getting that wrong. And we are probably impeding upon our kids' abilities to develop confidence and independence and a sense of confidence and a sense of being able to manage themselves in the world by the fact that we don't allow them to be bored, upset, frustrated, stymied, etc. Fill in the blank with the adjective of temporarily uncomfortable state that we as a parent have a hard time tolerating in our kids. Seeing that look comes across your kid's face and you just want to fix it. And that is, I think, probably quite contrary to the goals of happy, satisfied, independent, competent kids.
Guilty. Even down to I think most of our kids have never felt hunger or thirst, right? We have all the snacks and So Anne, continuing on that theme, what have you observed in your years of practice and personally about how parents are spending time with their kids and how this affects their kids' happiness?
And it's the programmed quality of it all that I think is the toughest thing. And the kids expect it. You know, what's our plan today?
Right.
You know, what have you put on for me today?
Yes, exactly.
And there's also a lot of, you know, I don't want to hear arguments. This is how we're doing it, you know? And it seems to me that I just wonder if on a Saturday morning, if you got up and said, you know, and I think this gets back to another thing you're saying, Matt. I think parents can own that they have some needs too. Like, I am going to be busy. I have something I'm working on this morning, and you're just going to have to find something to do. I'm a big reader, and one of my irritations is that kids they're being put on videos all the time. I mean, I like a good story, and I'll take it any way I can get it. If it's a movie, I'm on to that. If it's I just like stories, but you know, there's something you gain from flipping through the book and reading a story and then not wanting to do anything because you really want to stay in bed and finish it. And that's not the norm anymore. That used to be the norm when I grew up. That was my favorite thing as a teenager. I wanted to stay in bed, maybe bring breakfast up in bed and just read all morning. But I'm old. That's an old artifact. But I do think this issue of having kids understand that everybody in the family has needs, and you know, it's in big families, this is kind of easier because it's so clear that everybody has needs. But we have littler and littler families. And why can't you do it the way I want it? But I think that's just good social development, is learning to listen to other people, that they have needs too, and we have to take that all into account. So I think this, you know, we haven't talked specifically about play, but we all know that play is the great way you learn. And whether you're lucky enough to have a playground nearby where you all can hang out and teach each other different games in the city, that's increasingly hard. I was appalled by this phenomenon that happened a couple of years ago with the kids in the park. And the parents went home, and the kids were like 9 and 7, 8 and 6. And they were left in the park. And then they were going to walk the 2 blocks to the house. And the police were called because these kids were left in the park. And the police took the kids home. And then, really, how dare you leave your children unattended? That sort of went against all my views of parenting, which was let the kids be out there, do their thing, and
Is that yours?
I think it was maybe mine. This happened once before when I was in
Birthday wishes.
big. No, that's absolutely true. So, I just think giving kids freedom, you know, it's gotten so that giving kids freedom is something like this. Let's go for a walk. Well, that's pretty nice. And giving freedom is, it's your walk. You get to decide where we're going. You know, I'll come with you, but it's up to you. And those are the ways that I think you can help your kids in this sort of crazy world where it's not always safe to make decisions and just not be passive and wait for their parents to plan it all out for them. We need to kind of push them. It's one of the things that I really think is kids need to learn to cook. And I think they should early on get everybody to know how to make a meal, and whether they do it once a week or once a month, I really don't care. But they need to learn how to cook. And they need to learn how to how to turn on the stove and not have everybody melt down and then burn down the house, you know? So that's what I would say is just sort of more freedom, more independence, but things that are fun. I mean, that gets back to the joy. Like, you know, cooking a meal, sitting around the table, that's pretty fun. How about dance parties? You know, the kids, you don't know what to do, turn on some music. And if you want to get the joy fast, turn on some great music that the kids love and let them at it. That's my idea of the fastest way to joy.
So this is the last question I'm going to ask all three of you, and then we're going to open it up for questions. And Matt, you alluded to this. Part of this is, I think it's hard for parents to tolerate their kids' pain or their kids' discomfort, right? It's hard for all of us. So how can parents help themselves? Let's start with that, but help themselves and therefore their kids become a more emotionally resilient. And I'd love to hear from anyone who would like to speak to that.
You ever thought? You were loaded up.
I think I would give a thought, then I want to hear yours. I think it's not doing anything sometimes is the answer. Like you just are present and you don't rush in to analyze the situation. Here are 5 alternatives to pick from, but just sort of listen. Oh my God, this is a dilemma. You know, and it's so interesting when you're quiet for a while. Like, they say something, but we often don't let them. So that would be my thought. Silence.
When your parent is a shrink. My kids get it too. Yeah. I like, this is, I hesitate to give direct parenting advice because it's so hard to follow and because it's so rarely followed by those doling it out, but I'll try. I mean, some things I like that I find work with my kids is telling them about the things that I screw up. They love hearing about that. Sort of talking genuinely and respectfully to your kids as people that are interested, that like know something about the world, and telling them about something you're having a hard time with, something that you got wrong, somebody that you can't get along with at work. Not something about how you can't get along with your other parent. That's not a good idea. Don't share that with your kids. But just about what it's like to be an adult in the world, and how kids oftentimes have the very erroneous misperception that we've got it sort of figured out and that we know how to live, and that they are struggling all the time and don't know the rules and can't figure it out. And reminding them that we're all kind of making it up is helpful. How we bounce back from things, how we got through something difficult, how we embarrassed ourselves. They love that as well. It's much easier to talk about that than to talk about their own difficulties and shortcomings. And it's also an example of resilience. So if you get knocked back down, you get knocked down, you get back up. I think it's also Costa was talking about, it's not just how much come back to the screen time thing. It's not just, I don't know how many people have younger kids or younger grandkids, but one of Costa's colleagues and mine at Georgetown studies very young children in media. And I think there's an instinctive thing we all feel that like no 2-year-old should ever be in front of a screen. The research is actually that it's a little more nuanced like that, like everything is with human beings. A 2-year-old being handed a tablet when they're having a tantrum is a terrible idea. Watching a show, even if a 10-minute video with your 2-year-old and talking about it while you're watching it, commenting about it, reflecting on it, wondering about it, asking them questions about it, and using it as a chance for both of you to just sort of like have a chance to cool out for a minute. It's probably, all due respect to books, and I'm pushing books left and right. It's just as good as reading a book to your 2-year-old. It really is on a interpersonal neurobiology kind of level. Your shared attention and an experience that you're having together. That's what's good for kids' brains, for little kids' brains. So, not all screen time is bad, but being selective about those experiences is a really important thing for parents to do. I'll have other ideas too, but why don't I'll kick it to Costa.
Yeah, I will say I'm, I guess, the only non-parent on this panel, so I want to be especially careful about doling out advice. But yeah, just echoing this whole sentiment about, I think, and we don't want to put too much sort of blame on parents again, because again, if everybody else's parents are taking them to activities, then
Right.
like your kid doesn't have anybody to play with, right? And so it's more like, I guess, this idea of creating community over a long period of time, making sure that the kids do have opportunities for this unstructured play, and then just let them have it and not interfere, right? And so, many of those the comments made me think about a critical issue right now is the increase in anxiety in college students that I teach, and so one of the reasons for that, people often blame social media and all that stuff, and maybe that's part of it, but a big part of it is this over-involved parenting, which again, it's not necessarily, the parent being helicopter parent, but just the way, again, the whole system is structured, that you take them to all these activities, and then all of a sudden they find themselves in college without the ability to know what to do in terms of, handling difficulties themselves, right? So just, I guess at the broadest level is to think about promoting independence as one of those competencies that are actually critical for success. And so this in and of itself is a really important thing above and beyond, knowing how to play the cello or whatever. Yes.
Yeah. Anything else come to you, Matt? Yeah.
Well, when I'm driving home.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would love to open up the floor to any questions for our panelists, comments, thoughts.
I'm a grandmother of 7 and had 2 daughters. And it seems the older I get, the more I want to micromanage and make sure everybody's safe. And, my grandkids say, you average 4 hours a day on your iPhone. And I'm like, but you should be on yours. So I don't know. Maybe it's what's going on in our world, but I just want to keep everybody close and make sure they're okay. And so I'm overindulging all of them. I realize that. And I guess your question would be, if I was sitting here 20 years ago, would I be saying this, or is it what's going on in our world?
Yeah, but
Please.
I was going to say, I think part of the thing that's going on in our world is what we've been talking about, which is that, us and the kids have less, unstructured time, right? And so when it's almost like lack of exposure, right? And so, it's almost like you haven't had your kids play, if your kids were playing outside every day, then it's safe outside, outside. And if they haven't done it, then it's like, well, maybe something bad would happen. So I don't think the world is inherently that dangerous. Obviously there's, horrible, the shootings and things like that didn't happen before, but still the chances of that happening are still, astronomically small in any particular place and time. But, so I'm not sure if people have become worse to each other. It's just that I think we have sort of replaced opportunities to remind ourselves that most people are nice and most strangers are kind. And so I think that's part of what's going on.
It's interesting. That reminds me, sorry.
Please.
When you were talking about this earlier too, it reminds me of, and I apologize, I don't know which of Michael Pollan's work it's from, but the missing kids on the milk
Correct.
carton,
Yes,
where it started then.
it did. It did. Contemporaneous with general. Does everyone know the reference? Basically, in the early 80s, the missing kids on the milk carton created, which was contemporaneous with cable television.
Yeah.
Into the internet, into social media, and so that an experience anywhere became an experience everywhere.
Yep.
And that, in fact, objectively, your grandkids are much safer than your kids were, and your kids are much safer than you were. The world is a much safer place for children than it used to be, objectively. Just looking at victimization of children, it's much less than it used to be. But when victimization happens, you know about it everywhere. And so it feels next door, no matter where it was. So that raises the sense of, and of course there are children in certain places, in certain areas, that are at risk. But on a population level in our society, thank God, the kids are safer. But we don't feel that they're safer. We feel that they are in peril, that we are all in peril. And so it creates a sense of a looming disaster, which is, I'm coming back to like sort of evolution again, like as social beings, it is all but impossible to overcome a social phenomenon on one's own. To decide, this is what Jonathan Haidt talks about, this sort of the social dilemma of phones, right? It's great to say that I'm not going to get my kid a phone until they are then cut off from all of their peers, and then it becomes a really destructive decision for your kid. The only way to overcome social dilemmas is to do it in small social groups. So it comes back to some Anne's points about community. I mean, people can decide they want to live differently with their family and their children in small groups and start to build up a sense of we're doing it differently. We're doing dinners, whether through cultural groups, we haven't talked about faith and religion at all, whether like that is a source of people coming together and having a structure around life that is sort of a superstructure that has worked for a long time. Like, yes, there are downsides to it and there are things that make the people feel constrained, but if we're constantly optimizing for individual freedom, guess what? Like, that's associated with loneliness. Like, individual freedom that is maximized is a pretty lonely place to be. And so if we want to mitigate against loneliness, we also have to sacrifice some degree of individual freedom and do things in groups together. This is what we care about. This is what we believe. This is what we value. It's dinner on Friday nights, or it's religious services at this time, or it's things that we do. And as a community, as this class, as this neighborhood, whatever, this is what we're going to do about phones. This is what we're going to do about curfew. This is what we're going to do about how families get together. About 7 and 9-year-olds walking down Colesville Road, which is where they were, like just over Silver Spring, without an adult.
Yeah. Can't go for ice cream.
Valerie, hi, I have a question. I have older children, so I asked a question kind of a little bit too late, but I'm curious to get your thoughts. As a child, you grew up in the 70s and 80s as well. I feel, looking back, and this is purely anecdotal and through my lens, that I had more opportunities to fail and come back. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's in my head. I don't know if that's because this community is this community. Success is defined one way. I mean, not one way, but in a very narrow way. I don't know why, but I feel the opportunities to just get it wrong, live your life, do things differently, and still, whatever success means, whether it's paying your bills, or being a part of the community, and you talk about AI and what jobs are, what opportunities are, you don't know. So I think there's that anxiety and angst for an older parent with like teens and 20, I don't know if you do badly now in school, and I don't even mean high school, I mean college. People in my generation didn't go to college and they were able to bounce back or do whatever. Like, I know they'll work it out and they hopefully have that competence and resilience and support, but I feel like they're lucky. that a lot of kids just can't fail. And I know schools feel that pressure too. Like, how do you teach kids to fail? They're like, failure's good. And it's like, is it? Is it really? Like, how do you teach them it's okay to fail and yeah, learn from your lesson, but if everyone's fixing it and they're not failing, they do it later and later and later in life, and the cost seems worse later in life. So not to be a downer.
Absolutely.
I could be just this existential question and big thing out there, but that's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and as a parent of an older child, not quite sure how to teach that to my children.
I think there's a big body of research that talks about the perfect kid, the kid who's always got good grades, is a good athlete, president of the class, the perfect kid. Then they have some reverse, like the person they fall in love with has fallen out of love with them. I mean, like, happens. And they are smushed because in their lives they've been able to kind of make it all work out until it doesn't. And those kids I worry about the most because they haven't been practicing resilience all along.
I think there's a ton of wisdom in what you said, but what I actually don't know is are opportunities actually narrowed, or is that just a narrative? And we've convinced ourselves that you have to hit all these marks along the way when you're raising kids, that your kids have to hit these marks, or somehow imaginary doors close. Is that really true or not? I don't know, but I think you're 100% right that that's the operating assumption.
That's the perception.
Very early on, yeah. And it has all kinds of, it has totally crazy manifestations, like sports. Like if you're 8 and you don't know what sport you're good at and what sport you're going to play on the travel team, well, that's done. Why bother? So like participation in youth sports has plummeted. It's at 20% of what it was 30 years ago, 20%. So kids don't play rec sports anymore. They play rec sports when they're 5, 6, 7, and 8, and then they get onto a travel team, and then they're done. They're done with all the other sports, and the kids who don't make the travel team don't play sports anymore. And like participation in recreational sports has gone off a cliff. Meanwhile, there's this, literally billion-dollar complex that private equity firms are now buying all the travel leagues because they're so profitable. And like that's what kids sports have become. Like kids sports are not about playing sports in college. Like, kids sports are about like, dealing with other people and losing and being on a team. Yeah, I'm working with a colleague at one of the University of California schools around this movement that he wants to develop around with the Y that is just basically every kid needs a team. And it could be a soccer team, it could be a robotics team, it could be being on the tech team at the school play, but every kid needs to be on a team. And most kids are not on teams. Most 10-year-olds are not on a team. And it's because of that phenomenon you're talking about. It's this sort of like, you got to be like laser focused on these goals, and as soon as you're not pursuing some sort of very success-oriented goal, that the other experiences don't matter, which is like I think really lousy for kids. But also we could change it. Like it need not continue like that. That seems to be something that could change.
I was just going to say that your comment kind of reminded me a little bit of grade inflation in college. And so, I started at Georgetown 7 or 8 years ago, and I came in from a school where, the average for the class was supposed to be, 68%. And anyway, and so I came in with, my previous exams and administered them to the Georgetown students, and I nearly had a riot, as a new and so that, part of it, I also went to a school where, you didn't really, you had grades at the register, but, your professor wouldn't give you the grades, so I was trying to kind of cultivate the same thing. But anyway, over the long term, I found that the only way to get my students not to over-focus on the grades is just to make the class easy enough, so so that we could all focus on learning. I'm sorry, but anyway, so that it just resonated with me, and on the one hand, I'm I came here with sort of an idea of what I'd like to do, and then I quickly fell in line, and I was like, yep, no, yes, med school, get an A, whatever. Yeah.
I want to comment on that because my son right now is 20, he's turning 26.
Right.
So, but there was a turning point for him in his college days. Early in college, he just wanted to get through it, right? And yeah, it was always the professor's fault. There's always the professor's fault. It was either the exams weren't written right, or it was that he couldn't understand the question. No, it was he didn't want to pay attention. He didn't want to take the time, right? And that he was taking a coding class. And to this day, I will love this professor. He was taking a coding class, and he did the wrong thing. He copied a piece of coding off the internet and inserted it into his code, thinking that it was perfectly okay. It's only a piece of coding. And that grade came back as a 0. And he was like, I can't believe it. I said, he had to go in front of the panel. He had to go and, he had to present what he did to the professor, and it went all the way up to the dean, and he had to have this meeting. And he just thought it was the worst thing in the world, right? Like, I didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
They took the time during that panel and that meeting to explain to him how catastrophic that one mistake could have been if he was working for a corporation. If that code had malware in it, and it went out, could crush the whole, I'm not a coder, I'm not IT, but basically that.
Right.
And he said, oh, well, and the professor said, look, you're smart. I'm going to let you redo this. I'm going to let you redo the entire project. And I'm like, why? You should just fail. And the professor said, I want you to redo it. Because now you know what you can't do and what you need to do. He said, you still get a 0. But you will have completed the project. That was an absolute turning point for my son. After that, the effort, went from, 30, 40% to 100%. He's Dean's List. He's University of Maryland Dean's List since he started. And it was just an absolute turning point. That professor allowed him to fail. He let him fall on his face and then helped him learn how to get back up and do it right.
For the right reasons.
For the right reasons. And it was an absolute turning point for my son.
And you can go marching in there and fix it.
Right. Exactly.
I think, piggybacking on what you said, the difference, because I have 3 biological girls of different ages. So I have one 25, one 17, and one 12. And the big difference between schooling, education for the 25-year-old versus my 12-year-old who is now in middle school, it is not the same accountability, unfortunately, that's provided to our youth. The professor giving him the 0, in the 80s when I was in school, the 0 was 0. When I worked in the school system before moving here, the teachers were told you cannot give the students less than a D. So for that one student who's tried their hardest and the best that they could achieve was a D, there's an injustice because then you have the other student who has, I'm just not showing up to class, or I just don't want to do my work, and they're given the D. So then there's no accountability, so there will be no turning point, no recognition of, hey, what am I doing? What should I be doing better? And then, like Paula got ready to say, you didn't march in there and fuss at them. The parents have handicapped our youth because then they're combating against the teachers who are trying to, the education starts in home first, and the teacher is there to reinforce to your physical, to the athletics. The young people of today, my 12-year-old, she's a cheerleader because she wants to be active, and I push that because when I was growing up, you went outside and played. You know, we had to be in by the streetlights, but you went outside, you were interactive physically with other people, so your social skills were there. It built your mental, your emotional, your psychological. It built that because you interacted, but now her friends, they want to sit on the phone and, oh, I'm playing Roblox or these other games, and then, you know, my niece, that's 11, she wants to watch YouTube to watch people play.
Oh, yeah.
She is not playing, which I don't understand. She is watching other people. Social skills. So for her, she is one of the children that has some social and emotional needs going on. And when it's time for her to interact in person or she doesn't want to do anything physical. She doesn't want to participate because what she wants to do is be on a device, on the TV, on the tablet. And society and social media has become such it's such a bad thing, I feel. I feel that these little children in elementary school don't need cell phones. For what? Who are you calling? You're with an adult at all times, you know. If you're in danger, you can go to the office at school, you can ask your teacher, but it becomes a babysitting tool because parents are overwhelmed. Parents are frustrated, so here's a tablet at 2, play with that, and just leave me alone because I've worked all day. And now this is becoming a piece of trauma for the young people because they're our future and they have no skills of interacting. They have no skills of logic thinking, problem solving, because everything is solved by Siri and Alexa and the phone, the device. And that's where, but as a parent, now how, because again, you said what happens when everybody else has the phone, but my child doesn't. Now it's my child can be depressed. Do I have to put my child in counseling? How do I, as the parent, help this, you know, this child because it was different for the other children? How can you come together to make it a successful situation for your child?
When somebody figures that out.
She's like,
You really?
I think it comes back to what you were saying also earlier about community, right? Like communities are decreasingly local. And so with the expansion of community means that there are less opportunities to be out on the block because that was the street light rule too. And so the free roaming is challenging. A lot of the kids are playing on different teams and the school is no longer the locus of community for kids. And so I think that makes a lot of this challenging on a systemic basis, which comes back to, you know, you really have to be very intentional about building a community as a parent, which is one of 1,000 things you're supposed to be good at. And it's not great for introverts. And in terms of building that intentional community, you know, you have to very actively engage and only in the communities can you sustain these changes to the tide swell.
I fully agree, and like I will say, one of the things that I'm taking away from this panel is I think all three of you like sprinkled this in, is that it's kind of on me to create that community and those spaces for them to have like what I deem a normal childhood. I'm a 90s kid, but to have that unstructured play, to have those opportunities to build resilience, and like I think what I will be trying to implement is, you know, understanding that the anxiety of our society and how things are structured, like that's my anxiety, and I need to find ways to create spaces for my children that can let me sit with those anxieties while they just are kids. So I fully agree with that.
You know, it doesn't go away when they get older, so. You know, I think we talk about letting your kids my parents put a note in my hand, my brother's hand in mine. We walked to a market in Southeast DC by ourselves and we bought something. God knows where I was and made it back. We were 4 or 5 years old. I wouldn't let my kids go to the mailbox on their own. I'm not kidding you. I'm petrified that something horrible is going to happen to them. And it doesn't get better when it gets older. I will say I now have their location on my phone. So when my daughter is at the Navy Yard, I'm very worried. And I'm really petrified that something's going to happen. You know, that curfews are keeping the kids out, and she's way beyond curfew age, but I don't want to be, someplace where she'll get in trouble, right? So I think to myself, what do I do about that now? Do I not check her location?
Take it off your phone.
You did ask. You asked.
I'll listen to the psychiatrist.
Yes. Yes. It is better for you and better for her not to know.
Yeah.
That was the easiest question of the afternoon.
Because I said to myself, I was in places I shouldn't have been.
You're damn right. We all were. That's how you learn.
Now look at you now.
There's a theme of us in here that share it's 10 o'clock, do you know where your children are? Yeah, like that, I thought you were with that earlier than the news. I was like, oh, she's going there, because that was a real public service announcement. It's 9 o'clock, maybe. It was 9 o'clock, do you know where your children are? That was real. I was like, I'm right here, we were like 8 or something.
Most of the time now, they're in their rooms on their phones. Yeah, so you know exactly where they are. And that's like, you know where they are, and is that better? I think you had a question, didn't you? Yeah.
So I'm on the journey.
Congratulations.
And I think that she will be an only child.
After this conversation.
It's been that good.
And I don't love being a mommy, but I am a little bit older and I'm pretty sure that was the last shot. So I'm trying to think about building community now. And I'm wondering if you have recommendations for literature where I can then indoctrinate, recruit other families to be a part of this. I will certainly be showing them this YouTube video, and I'm grateful for that. But is there any other literature, something that I can say, hey, read this, join me in having unstructured play with our kids. Let's reserve Saturdays for playing outside.
Yeah.
There are groups that do, is it?
There are a lot.
Or there are groups that bring young mothers and children together and they have some parenting tips, whatever, but it's really just to hang out and let the kids play. But do any of you know some groups like that are going on?
There are a lot of these free play projects.
This is a place.
So this
is a good example.
Yes.
So, and that, can you bring a 5-month-old?
Are you?
Yes.
Well, I don't need maybe 5 months is now, is maybe not the time, but just in planning, there's a group
Absolutely.
of other families that
Yes.
I know that have babies around the age of mine, and they can grow up together and they
Right.
can do this together.
Right.
If I can convince the parent, like, don't sign them up for every soccer and ballet
Yep.
and everything, save some time for this.
Yes. Yes. There are some. There's probably, I don't know if we can share out through the group, but there's a national project, and I'm blanking on the name. Actually, that John Haidt actually helped to start. Somebody else is running it now. That's sort of a framework for how to work within the context of your kindergarten class or within the context of your neighborhood association to sort of say, here's some things that we want to sort of live by in our community. And it's not like you're signing your life away as a family, but you're sort of like these are some values that we hold, these things we're going to try to stick to. There are some frameworks for it. You don't have to do it totally on your own.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I have a quick question for Ian. Because you stated this earlier, so that anybody can ask, when you said that it has to be up to the child as to what they decide they want to do, I believe that's very true, very good, because I've been encouraging to my children, the ones that want to do things physically or be a part, and it'll enable me to build community with those parents. But what do you suggest for a parent to do that could be encouraging to their child that doesn't have the desire to do something physical, or you want them to get away from, like my niece, she's into the TV, but I would prefer for her to maybe get into something that she may like physical, something else other than, so what do you suggest could be like, I'm outside of just making them do it, because that's not a good idea.
Yeah, it's really hard. Because, you know, it all depends on what the kid's kind of bent is. And there's some kids that aren't athletic and they don't like music. I mean, it look like it's hard to find something. But, you know, I was thinking of a first grade group that got together. The mothers got together with their kids for a book club. Now, these books were, I guess, Mo Willems or something, but it was the idea. The kid at that point, for second, third grade, kids will often go with their mothers to do something, right? So you might think of that might be a way in to some activity that would then have a momentum if they liked it. I think a lot of life is a taste test.
Mm-hmm. Where's the manual?
I'd like to bring up just a quick point as we're talking about. I worry that people will feel like, okay, now I've got to add another thing to my list to do. You know, okay, create community. Let me add that to the list of things as a parent. And Nat and Costa have a colleague who spoke at the last one of these we did about anxiety, and she made a great point, which was mostly, you all are doing a phenomenal job, right, of raising kids, and that when you let yourself off the hook a little bit, or you let figure out your own anxiety, that this is helping your kids too. And some of, I think, what you all have been talking about is like, address your own needs as well, and that's helpful, that's modeling to the kids, which is really important. And your mental health is probably one of the most primary things for your kids.
Don't forget Anne's point about the vodka tonics.
I think
Everyone needs to drink vodka tonics.
Please put it on your schedule.
But the thing that the community is not like just another task to add to the parenting list. Got to get community this week. It's like, what do you want to do? Like, who are the people that you're going to connect with? Your kids will figure it out. They'll find somebody to hang out with. Like, who are the people that you feel like you want to spend time with? And then, like, routines and repetition. And this is like, it's Friday, so we do this, or it's Saturday morning, or it's Sunday mornings, we do this. Like, those things kids really respond to.
So I'm fascinated by this data that moms are spending more time with their kids. That's fascinating to me. And when you were saying it, I was thinking, I wonder if it's because we got, the stuff beat out of us, that we weren't spending enough time, or we felt guilty because we were working. Mm-hmm. So we're overcompensating.
Yeah, I think oftentimes in the past when women when their role in the family was to like manage everything at home, there was not a lot of time on the floor playing Legos.
Sure.
It was like managing the home, and then like if there was a time break, like outside for a cigarette and chat with a neighbor. It was not like floor time with their kids.
But is that happening now? Or for parents spending time on the floor?
Yes. They're working a 10-hour day. They're coming home. They're somehow making dinner, and then they're saying, "Well, and now I have to have nurturing relational time with my 3-year-old." So they're on the floor playing Legos, and which is gorgeous. Like
at 6 p.m. during the witching hour. No 3-year-old.
Right. So it's part. I think it's guilt. It's guilt about work, and it's also like there's a cult of good parenting in our society. I mean, go to the bookstore. There's an entire section of parenting self-help. That's why I'm so reluctant to give parenting advice, because it's like people are drowning in parenting advice. And there's such a high expectation about like you have to be at your optimal parenting all the time, which is just totally unrealistic. But the data, I think the data is pretty real about time. And time isn't like in the house with your kid. It's in direct interaction with your child. It's more now than it used to
So
be.
you're not taking them to soccer. It's not, we don't count that as the time.
I don't remember. I don't know the exact accounting, but it's not you're downstairs reading a magazine and they're upstairs in their room. That doesn't count. It's like it's direct interaction.
I actually had a comment and a question, but my comment is, I think sometimes the best people to build community with are people who value community. So even if you don't necessarily have shared values, but the fact that you share this desire to build community is a value, right? And building community, as these folks know, is a huge thing for me. I love it. It's like brings me life. And so if anybody here wants more community, let me know, and I'm happy to bring you more. That's my comment. But my question is, so I have a 3-year-old, and you know, expecting one on the way, and my big question is, with my 3-year-old's having a lot of feelings, right? Like suddenly, yeah. So I am caught in between this belief of like letting her feel and emote and go through it, and also not wanting her to feel alone, like nobody cares about what she's feeling, and she has to like experience sadness or whatever she's feeling by herself. What has the research shown, or what have you guys experienced in how should one approach these big feelings? So you're not overdoing it with them, but you're also not like abandoning.
Well, so like we've got an expert in the back, Dr. Benzel here too, but it's it's different. What a 3-year-old needs, or big feelings, is different than what a 9-year-old and a 13-year-old need, right? Or a 51-year-old. Like 3-year-olds having big feelings need your help to make sense of the feelings. Like those feelings have words. They have words that we use to describe them. And we're not born knowing those words. So helping kids learn how to sort of label the feelings that they're having, and not squashing the feelings in the kids, but also not ignoring them, finding the place in the middle. Again, I'm not trying to be too prescriptive here, but there's somewhere in between. What we say to kids all the time is basically cut it out, or you're okay, or be a big boy or be a big girl. Like we've all said it. But like that sort of is diminishing the validity of the feelings. So the feelings are real. What are you feeling? Try to explain it to me. Do you feel this? Do you feel that? Helping them find words for it, helping them to label it, helping them to figure out how to like feel it and then get through it, and not sort of hovering over them for the entire experience. Like just kind of trying to walk that middle ground. Like that's amazing parenting. Just like trying to find that middle ground. You don't have to get it just right, and you get it right tomorrow and wrong the next day. And you just keep going. And it's just like how it goes. But like trying to find it, and then but with a 13-year-old, like they don't need you to walk them through every feeling. They need more time on their own to sort of navigate their feelings and make sense of it. Because if you're trying to label your 13-year-old's feelings, they're going to tell you where to stick it, or they're going to stop telling you, and it's going to turn into something else that's much worse. So they actually need a little bit more distance.
But I'd also say the classic 3-year-old thing is, you're not the boss of me, I'm the boss of me, I want a second ice cream cone, and so some of it is just developmental, that they're just asserting their will, and you can say, oh, you want another ice cream cone.
You're really frustrated, man. You can't have another ice cream.
But then you have to sort of tolerate the temper tantrum.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I think are we at time, Paul?
We're at time.
I think we're at time. This timing has been phenomenal. Thank you so much to our panel. As I said,